It started with a draft. A harmless little chill seeping through the living room window, the kind you'd barely notice in a house as old as ours. At first, I dismissed it, thinking it was just the wind being playful again. But then came the condensation, the warping of the frame, the little whistle that curled around our ears during late movie nights. That's when Sarah suggested the renovation. We'd been married 8 years. Comfortable, stable. Predictable, even. I was the kind of husband who vacuumed without being asked, who remembered to buy her oat milk, and who always made sure her side of the bed was warm before she slid in beside me. But if I'm being honest, I think the predictability was part of the problem. The window company she picked was one of those trendy startups. Local, sustainable, family-owned, according to their website. She found them online after a particularly breezy morning sent the newspaper flying across the kitchen. I didn't think much of it when she showed me the quote, just nodded and signed the check. I was busy with a work deadline, and Sarah handled things like this better than I did. His name was Drew. He showed up on a Wednesday morning. I remember it because I'd been working from home and came downstairs to grab coffee when I saw her leaning on the island counter, laughing. Not the little polite chuckle she gave the barista. This was that open, eyes crinkled, head thrown back kind of laugh she hadn't used around me in months, maybe longer. Drew was tall. Broad shoulders under a fitted gray work shirt, 2 belts slung casually over his hip, like he was born with it. He had that easy confidence some men wear like cologne, just enough to make you feel like you missed a memo somewhere in your own DNA. "He's fixing the west-facing windows today," Sarah had said when I walked in. She gave me a quick smile, her eyes darting between us like she was reading a room I hadn't even entered. "Right. Just let me know if you need anything," I said, trying to sound pleasant. Drew nodded toward me, one of those barely their chin lifts that meant nothing and everything. Then he got to work, humming under his breath as he stepped outside with his ladder. I told myself I was imagining things. People flirt. It's harmless. Sarah was friendly with everyone. But over the next couple of weeks, I started noticing the changes. She wore her hair down more often, something she used to say was too much work. She'd linger in the living room when Drew was working, sometimes bringing him lemonade or asking about what tools he was using. Once, I came home early from the office and saw her sitting on the porch with him, both sipping iced tea, their laughter trailing off the moment I stepped into view. Still, I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to be the guy, the paranoid husband, reading too much into eye contact and shared jokes. I clung to the comfort of denial like it was the last warm blanket on a cold night. Then came the Tuesday I couldn't forget. I'd taken the day off to work on the basement. Around noon, I realized I had left my phone upstairs. As I crept up, I heard voices, low, urgent, too close together. The hallway was quiet, but the bedroom door was cracked open just an inch. I stopped breathing when I saw them. Sarah was pressed against the far window, the new one Drew had just installed the week before. Her hands clutched the windowsill, and Drew stood behind her, shirtless, his back tense with movement. The image burned into me like frostbite, cold, numb, slow to register until the pain set in. I backed down the stairs without a sound, gripping the rail like I'd fall through the floor if I let go. I sat in the garage for hours, numb. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared at the concrete wall like it held answers to questions I couldn't ask. She didn't know I knew. Not yet. That night, when she climbed into bed beside me, she kissed my cheek like always. I kissed her back. I even pulled the blanket over her shoulder, just like I always did. Because sometimes, when something breaks, you don't fix it right away. Sometimes, you wait in silence, watching from behind the glass, to see if the whole house will come crashing down. The morning after I saw them, I looked at Sarah as if she were a stranger wearing my wife's face. She smiled while buttering her toast, asked if I wanted coffee, mentioned something about the forecast, and I played along. I smiled back, told her, no thanks, I was cutting back on caffeine. I watched her carefully. She still wore that soft robe of hers, the one I bought for our anniversary 3 years ago. She moved around the kitchen with the same rhythm as always, but I noticed the way she looked at her phone a bit too often. The way she jumped when it buzzed. She still said, "I love you," before I left for work, but now I heard it as punctuation, a period at the end of a sentence she didn't want to finish. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started cataloging everything. Timestamps, glances, absences. I stopped making small talk, and she seemed grateful for the space. It made me sick. Drew came back on Thursday. I watched through the upstairs window as his truck pulled up. He climbed out, looking like a man who knew he'd been welcomed where he didn't belong. Sarah met him at the door, glancing behind her as if checking for witnesses, then led him inside. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Instead, I went for a drive. Cleared my head. Tried to remember who we used to be. We were never perfect. But we were real. At least I thought so. That night, I waited until she fell asleep. Her breathing steady, one arm draped across my chest like it meant something. I eased out from under her and opened the browser on her tablet. No password. Just like always. The messages were there. Chat threads, saved photos. Conversations dripping with intimacy, full of things she hadn't said to me in years. Her words weren't just lustful, they were emotional. She called him safe. Said he made her feel seen. And just like that, I wasn't angry. I was broken. It wasn't just about the sex. It was about what she shared with him that she stopped sharing with me. The next day, I made a call. Not to a lawyer, not yet. I called a locksmith. Told him I needed all the locks changed. He asked if it was for safety or security. I said both. When Sarah got home that evening, the keys didn't work. She knocked, confused. I opened the door, calm as rain. "What's going on?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I stepped aside, let her in. She stood there, clutching her purse like it might anchor her to something stable. "You've got 10 minutes," I said. "Pack what you need. We'll talk after that. Somewhere public. Neutral." Her eyes widened. You know. I know everything," I said. "And I've known for a while." She started to cry. Not the kind of crying that begs for forgiveness. The kind that comes when the mask finally falls off and you realize the performance is over. "I didn't mean to fall for him," she said, voice cracking. "It just happened." "No one ever does," I replied. She asked me to listen, to hear her out. She told me how alone she felt, how the silence between us had grown loud, how Drew noticed things I didn't, how he made her feel like she mattered. "And I didn't?" I asked, not in anger, just tired curiosity. She looked away. "You mattered," she said. "But we stopped choosing each other. He was just there when you weren't." That was the moment I knew I had already let go. She packed quietly, took only what she needed. As she walked out the door, she paused, turned to me. "Are we really done?" "We were done the moment you invited him in," I said. The house felt different after she left. Quieter, yes. Emptier. But also clearer, like a fog had lifted. I didn't touch her things right away. I let them sit, like artifacts from a life that no longer belonged to me. In the following weeks, friends called, confused. Some shocked, others not. I told them I was okay. Not great, but okay. Healing wasn't instant. It was slow, uneven, and painful. But there was a peace and honesty, even if it came too late. I don't think of her every day anymore. But when I do, it's not with rage. It's with a sense of mourning. Not for the woman she became, but for the love we once built, the quiet partnership that cracked long before the window did. Sometimes you fix a draft. Other times, you tear the whole frame down and start over.